Hey everyone, welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. We talk about anything and everything mobile home parks on this show. It's either me or a guest here. Who knows what we're going to come up with on the next week, but I have a very, very, very special guest. And I'm sure you've seen this guy online. You're on YouTube and everywhere, just like me. So, Mr. Frank Rizzo,
Thank you
welcome,
for
man.
thank you for having me, Derek. Honored to be on your show.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny. Like, you probably get asked this too, like I do. Like, hey man, I can't do like in front of a video or social media. Like, why are you doing that? Or like, how do you do that? Do you get asked that question?
I do, and quite frankly, man, for the first 10 years of doing this, we just really didn't do anything. Like my partner and I were kind of social media quiet, right? Just in terms of what we were doing and how we were doing it. And then when we sat down last year and we said, we always get asked about what we're doing, and how we're doing it. And people love the stories when we tell them, but it's about how do we share that? And if we really wanted to expand the platform and we really wanted to get the message out, because we think what we're doing is so important, right? Affordable housing is an issue, creating great communities is an issue. And by not sharing or telling that story, we're doing a disservice, we believe, that, in terms of expanding out what we can do and the impact we could have. So my partner and I both weren't very comfortable starting to do this. But it's amazing. The more you do it, the easier it gets, the more comfortable you get with it. And I think the greatest part of what we've been able to produce online, Derek, and it's all organic. It's not
Yeah.
scripted. It's not written out. We don't create things to talk about. It's just what happens. And as long as we were comfortable with it, we found that it was easier just to do what we do. And now we could tell that story to our stakeholders and to other people interested in what it really takes to be an MHP operator.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I love what you're doing. And it's funny because even when I'll do a video in here and people ask me, oh, do you write a script for it? I'm like, nope. Hey, talk about this. My team will say, hey, well, you should video on this. And boom, I'll flop on the camera and just go, 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 go. And you're right. At the beginning, it's not, it's not that easy, but you figure it out. But yeah, so you've got, you're with Stone Capital Investors is your company. And
Correct.
so you've had a lot of prior experience in real estate and, you're doing mobile home parks and stuff now, but how did you actually get to this point?
By accident, Derek, because growing up in Brooklyn, New York, and living in Staten Island now, it's not the traditional trajectory of a real estate, entrepreneur in New York City to become a mobile home park operator. But just in doing what I was doing and working with a family that was looking to relocate and helping them through a really challenging time as they were disposing of some of their multifamily assets and looking to relocate down south, they wanted me to stay on board and help find them something to replace that income. And as I was, putting together a report and doing a thesis for them in terms of what they should look to invest in, the thing that kept standing out to me were these mobile home parks, which was something at that time I knew nothing about. When I made my recommendation to the family that this is the area or the asset class you should move into, the father, who was first generation immigrant, salt of the earth, said to me that the only way he would do it is if I stayed in the deal and I ran the community for him. So I had a crash course on what it takes to run a mobile home park. And, from that, my partner and I kind of took that experience and we just grew off of that. And we've expanded into, 4 states and 23 communities. And so it's been a tremendous ride over the last decade or so doing this.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And so you said you had a crash course on that first park. Did you just jump into it and you had to learn everything yourself, or did you you jump in and figure it out?
You jumped into it. I mean, look, I do a lot of research, reading. I would ask around to other people in that market, like, hey, what works, what doesn't. But at the end of the day, I found the best way of learning was actually doing. So I was just down on the ground, spent a lot of time down there, working inside that community. That was a community where there was former operator was in distress. The builder of the community held the mortgage. We get the mortgage assigned to us. We kind of turned those homes around, created a more of a community feel in there. And quite frankly, Derek, it checked a lot of the boxes for me in terms of not only doing well, but doing good work, right? You know what I mean? Like, and you have that impact on people. So that kind of really drew me in to that space, and it made me want to, be part of it more, quite frankly.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one of the things you said, kind of jumping in, which I think people get held up sometimes because they think that they don't know everything. And like, trust me, in these deals and these assets, each park is like unique in its own. And so you're not going to know everything. And the only way you're going to learn is if you take a little bit of risk and jump into a deal. And it sounds like you did that as well, because that's what I did. I had to jump in and kind of figure it out and get my teeth kicked in. And, sometimes, unfortunately, that's the best way to learn sometimes.
You know what it is? I mean, life is the best teacher. It'll give you the opportunity to figure out where you made your mistakes, figure out where you need to improve to move forward. Unfortunately enough, in that scenario, the result of it was really good. Like, we saw in 12 months a demonstrable change in the effective gross income, a huge change in the NOI. And so we knew we were on the right track, and we had something there. So that was a real key indicator for us. Didn't mean that we didn't make mistakes. And I could tell you, as when we went off on our own and we were doing our own deals, raising our own capital for that, you're going to make mistakes. It's just part of the process, but it's just having a good system in place where you could recognize the mistakes soon, right? And then you can make that pivot point to where you could try to make those changes going forward. But, people say you've been in the space a long time. It means we've had an opportunity to make a lot of mistakes, right? So we've had a lot of experience to learn from. And so hopefully we can just, carry that over on each community we go forward with.
Yeah, for sure. And you said something that was interesting. Like, you realized that that you were doing good work. Like, you were doing more than just investing in real estate. Like, there was a deeper meaning to what you were doing. Was there something that happened that like made you have that realization?
I'll tell you one of the things that are most striking to me, and look, it's one of the reasons why I'm in real estate in the first place, right? You want to go in there. We started as, speculators or renovators of distressed property, and you want to make that house stand out. You want to raise, the standard in maybe a block, right? But it's tough to have a community impact when you're, in single family homes. It's challenging to do that. You're not going to impact the entire neighborhood. But one of the things that stood out to me the most, right? And it was the second transaction that my partner and I had done. We purchased a property out of foreclosure. It was probably, at that time, it was probably one of the worst properties we've ever bought. You drove in, the playground had a 12-foot prison fence around, with poison ivy on it. There was a drug dealer in the front of the park, tattoos on half of his face, and he would drive a bike to like 4 trap houses throughout this community. A lot of vacant homes. The good people were inside, all the bad people were outside, right? So I'm sure, Derek, you've had that experience.
Oh, yeah.
A year later, right? So exactly 14 months later, because I actually we closed in June and then it was August of the next year. When we come to that community, the roads are paved, the new playgrounds installed. And as I'm, walking the blocks, right, there's an ice cream truck with a whole gaggle of children chasing the ice cream truck. 12 months before that would not have happened, right? And if that doesn't bring like a good feeling and an impact of, hey, we're investing money to obviously for an economic benefit, but we're really having an impact on the people that are there and changing that community. I don't know what else does. And I've yet to find it anywhere else in real estate where you can have that kind of sense of accomplishment on multiple levels. And that's the thing, Derek, that really resonates with me in terms of what we do and how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's awesome, man. And I had some of the same realizations, like, the first park that we bought, I'm not going to get into the story about how I got it, but I sort of fell into the deal. It was scary to walk through there. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, right? But after we came in and we cleaned, some of the same stuff that you dealt with, trap houses, drug dealers, like, the whole 9 yards. Um, but in the neighborhood that it was in was okay. But this
Mhm.
park occupies kind of a whole block in this particular neighborhood. But when you go into this park now, because all the homes are tenant owned, so the pride of ownership is kicked in. We've owned the park for about almost 4 years now. And you wouldn't even believe, right? And even going through it today, it makes me feel good, because if someone would have looked at that park in the beginning, they would have been like, dude, this park needs to be freaking bulldozed.
Mhm.
Like, it's beyond repair. And to look at it now in a city that's, strapped for affordable housing, you know, like, it's a huge thing. Even that park was, we've got, I think, 24 units there now. But, that's 24 families that we can now help and give them a clean, safe, and affordable place to live in a market to where that's not difficult to find.
And you know what? I'm sure you could speak to this too. Like, you've changed the perception of what one of these communities are in that city or town, right? So you go to a lot. We've gone to a lot of places where initially the community would want that mobile home park closed down, right? It's suffered
Sure.
from so much disinvestment. It has such a bad connotation or reputation that the community itself would almost rather that park go away. And to your point, that's eliminating all the affordable. So the town has affordable housing issues, but because these assets are so poorly run or so mismanaged or so undercapitalized, that they almost would rather have this blight disappear, and you're displacing all those residents that need affordable housing options. So if we do our job right, we can maintain those affordable options in those communities, and then provide maybe a different look. So maybe when they look at the other park in that town, that might be the same way. They want to see it stay and remain, but just be improved. And I think that's some of the changes that we've seen, that we've been fortunate to be a part of, and I'm sure you've seen it too. I mean, in your
Oh, yeah.
experience in the communities you're taking over.
Yeah, for sure. And like the example of this first park here, and people probably heard me say this on the show before, is that the health department used to bring their new staff to this park to show them an example of the worst, right? And now to be able to turn that around, and it's like it's a nice community now, is pretty cool. I wanted to ask you one thing on this. You talked about, we go into these municipalities. I think when you're in bigger cities, like some of our stuff is, they're more difficult to deal with to a degree. And I've seen posts of you and your partner on LinkedIn, I believe, where you guys go to the town hall sometimes, I think. And so what's your protocol in doing that, and how do you get the city on your side? Because sometimes they're not.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing we do whenever we go into any of these cities, I mean, we realize we're a guest in your community, right? So if you want us there, we're a guest, and we want to fit in with the fabric of the community and get a sense to make sure that we're doing everything compliant. We're not just doing things because we feel that we can or we want to. We want to make sure that we're doing everything compliant, and we want you to be aware of what our business plan is. This is what it needs to be done to be for this plan to work. And if you want us here now, we have a book of history and life cycle that we could show people. Hey, this is what you'll end up getting if we're able to do this. So I think that obviously helps. But what I've found, especially recently, even in these smaller municipalities, Derek, the big issue is data, right? So when these parks were built in a lot of these cities and towns, they may have been approved, right? But there was no master plan. It was, here's a site, you have 50 acres, there's 80 homes. They don't know where the homes are. They don't know where the connections are, right? They don't. So I think the cities want, hey, where are these homes plotted out? What are you doing when you're bringing it? Where are these connections are? It helps them. So we want to be their partner. If you're coming in there, this is our plan. We'll give you what you need for your data, but this is the plan we're looking to execute on. And if there's something we need to do, I'd like to know beforehand, right? So we can take care of that in the underwriting. We can make sure that we're all on the same page. And then our team doesn't have any surprises, after we own the asset. So for the most part, that strategy has worked by far and large. I mean, we found that most communities are receptive to have that type of investment or development there. And we want to show them that we're a capable partner for them in enhancing the community and creating more, affordable housing options for them.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And has it ever worked in reverse? Because sometimes I've dealt with enough of these municipalities that I sort of know how they are. And sometimes I've found it's better to not poke the bear on something than to poke the bear on something. So has it ever worked in reverse for you at all? But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So it's funny. And there was one town, and I don't never forget this, right? So I'm sitting down with this gentleman, and he's the tax assessor. So we're talking about, there was a number of vacant homes that were there on site. And, as we're buying the property, the ownership of these homes, people disappeared. Nobody knows who owns them. And there was a couple of homes that were really blighted, like just really blighted. One had a fire, one, just basically or torn out. I mean, how it was standing, I don't even know. So I go in and I talk with this gentleman, and, I explain to them the situation. Like, we have a hazard. We have something that we think is dangerous. We have children there. We don't want anybody running through this. And he gives me the textbook answer. This is what you need to do. This is abandonment. This is how it'll take. And then he looks at me and goes, but I'll tell you, something was on my property and I didn't want it. It wouldn't be there. Right. And so I walked out of there. My partner's like, well, what do you think that meant? And I meant that they said, and I don't want to, we better stop being little, what? And we just came in there.
You could throw it out on this show. We don't.
Nobody was any the smarter or the wiser, and they were happy, right? So you're correct. There's a way to do it, but when it comes to infill, right, and connections, we just want to make sure that we're, we don't want to have any issues along the way. We happen to do a lot of infill projects. We don't want to have any roadblocks in handling those items, because that could really stop a project or delay it for months on hand. So that's something we really want to make sure we know the process before we start the project.
Right. And you, when you say process, you mean by, hey, if there's no, if you have to put a new electric pole there, what's the process for that? Like, how are they? Yeah. And that's,
zoning. Yeah. Zoning is a big issue, because sometimes it was built when it was zoned and now it's not. So you're dealing with non-conforming issues. And again, it comes down to, we've had some success with that and kind of explaining it, especially when you have a new generation of building department officials that may have came in, because in a lot of these towns, and I'm sure you've seen it, if the parks in that community have not been kept up with, new homes haven't come in, these building officials haven't done this, right? They are only going by the textbook, and they're not sure exactly how it's supposed to go. And you want to kind of go through the process with them beforehand, so you're not, time is money. If I'm buying a home and I'm getting it shipped, that manufacturer doesn't care that I don't have the permit, right? I bought that home. They want to make sure that that home is being paid for.
Yeah. And I think that's a fantastic point for people to think about, because of course, I learned the hard way. When we were trying to infill some homes, and it just took forever because of the roadblocks that we ran into. Because I think you're exactly right, because that building official has never experienced that. And if you're looking at the book, the 2024 version of the book, this park was built in 1960.
Yeah.
So it's like, nothing's going to be up to code. Right. And so when they look at it, it's like, oh my God, we'll never be able to get this done. But I think that's brilliant and great advice that you just gave there on that. It's huge.
I think part of the, having done development in New York City, and you dealing with what you deal with in the building department here, kind of gave us a good vantage point of just best practices of what should be done before you take on a project like this, because again, it's, especially infilling and bringing in new homes is going to be a key component. Quite frankly, the industry over the last few years has seen a lot of new applicants that have come in that are looking to revitalize these communities. And to your point, these, there is that, is this grandfathered in? Is this not? How do we make it work based off of what was there and what wasn't? So it's just a process. And we've just taken it as part of what we need to do in our diligence to make sure that our team is working in coordinates with the city. Cause like I said, we want a partnership. We want them to know, hey, we're coming in there. Here's our intent. We're looking to be, good purveyor of good stewards of the land, good purveyor of a community for our residents. And like I said, by and far and large, we've been welcomed, and that we've been really appreciative of.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, that's great advice. And it's good that you do that. What would you say to someone, because I get questions about infill projects and stuff all the time. You'd be surprised at some of the stuff that I get, guys buying a 75 space park, 50 vacant, and he wants to infill and he's not bringing in any extra money to do so. Like, what would you say other than talking to the building department, going in and trying to figure out what the process is and if they can actually do it? Other than that, what would you say, I guess, few pieces of advice for someone looking at an infill project?
One, I wouldn't do it right off the gate. Like I've like, that's not a project that I would take on day one, right? Because I think there's your timeline for creating that additional income. Like the deal shouldn't have to work solely on infill, right?
Yeah.
You should have some economics in the deal where you can kind of create some cash flow and create a community, and then the infill should be able to add to it, at least from the get-go. Second thing, and again, this was mistakes that we made, is just know your manufacturer. Like if you're going to infill, like, are you going to infill new homes? If you are, who you're buying your homes from, right? And make sure that where are they being manufactured out, what your shipping cost is going to be, who's going to help you in the setup, right? Because each state is a little different in their requirements. Each county could be different in terms of their requirements. It's different if you're hooking up to septic, if you're hooking up to city water, city sewer. So have that process kind of all played out as well. And your vendors, because the last thing you want to do is have a home delivered, right? Gets dropped off. Your setter's not ready. Your plumber's on another job and your electrician's nowhere to be found, right? Yeah. So those are all key components, and make sure you have everybody lined up when you're ready to do that infill. Like I said, we've done infill projects. We will do infill, but not every market is a new home market, right? So you have to know where your price point's going to be and what type of homes am I going to infill that community with. So, I mean, it's another level of complexity, but I wouldn't suggest starting out like, I think I talked somebody out. They were looking at a 72 unit park that was all vacant, that had been dormant for 23 years. He's like, I have this to infill. And I'm like, you don't have enough money. Like, no infrastructure. You got to pave roads. I mean, there's just no way you're going to be able to do that. If you're looking to make money in 2 years, that's not going to happen.
Right. Because it's a lot of work. And I figured that out after, that first park, we had vacant lots. And I'm like, look, I found a used home. Let's bring it in. Roadblock. And it took forever. And, there's just a lot of hoops you got to jump through. Like you said, the plumber, the electrician, if you can get them there, if you can get them to show up, hopefully you have a good one. Hopefully you have a good mover that doesn't hit the neighbor's house. We had that happen before.
We actually had, and look, this is stuff that happens in the space. They're supposed to be 4 feet from the septic. And I had somebody who's a mover, right? Sets the home, set it 2 feet from the septic, right? So what do you do, right? And then who pays for it, right? Do you go back to your mover? And a lot of times these are just, they're blue collar working guys. It gives us a great price to get it done. It's 2 feet. Now you could blow a relationship over that, or you could say, all right, now we just have to work on this, and let's figure out a way where we could, over time, it'll kind of all come out in the wash, right? Where we'll have to but that home had to get pulled out and reset because I couldn't get it approved, it being 2 feet from the septic, right? So these are all things that could happen in an infill project that you have to be, as an operator, you just have to be conscious of.
Right. Yeah. And I, in the people that are in our program and stuff, and I, same advice that you just gave, a few minutes ago. It's like the infill is there for value add, but I always look at it as sort of a bonus. The deal is not contingent upon me bringing in 20 homes, right?
Correct.
It works now. And then if I bring in 10 homes, it's a home run kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, doing a whole part, you got to be, that's more of an advanced task to do a whole infill project.
Correct. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, we've looked at certain infill projects, but it's a project, and in some cases, it's better off just building it from scratch yourself, which we haven't done yet. But we have done expansions, but it's a project, and I think early on that would probably be a challenging project for anybody, regardless of the skill set they have coming in, to just say, hey, we're going to do an infill project to start. I love the opportunity or the opportunities when there's homes there on place. We can create some value there, and then you can infill along the way. Because what inevitably ends up happening, and I'm sure you've seen this, Derek, you do a good job in the community, you'll get people who want to move their homes in, which all of a sudden changes some of the roadblocks you have, right? Because now I don't have to find the home, source the home. Somebody says, hey, this community looks great. I see what you're doing. I want to move my home into your community. And there's a huge benefit to that, right? I've saved the cost of the home. I may have saved the setup, whatever the case may be. And I'm infilling from basically the park marketing itself, which to me is the ultimate validation that you've done a good job.
Yeah, for sure. And you've so I've never had someone, maybe we've had people call and say they're going to move their homes in, and then it just doesn't transpire for whatever reason. But, what do you think a key component is in actually turning around a mobile home park? Because, I look at your sign behind you and you get hey, people want to move in here and want to live here. And we've gotten, comments and people so happy of the things that we've done at the park. But in your opinion, Frank, what is a key component in that?
I think, and I think this is the one thing that I think gets overlooked, especially when you have a lot of, and I'm going to call it cold money. Like a lot of big money started to pour into the space, but it's a little distant and a little cold, where we tell people we're not local, we're very hands-on, right? So we want to maintain that local operator feel, even though we're operating remotely. The key component, we believe, is changing the culture of that park, right? Because if you're taking over, and we're very value add, very opportunistic. If you want to change a community around, you really have to start with the culture of the people that are there and the expectations of the people who are going to be there. And changing that, while it's low cost, it's the biggest effort, right? It's making sure that you're maintaining standards. It's following through on what you say you're going to do, right? It's not taking just anybody who could afford the first month's payment and the application fee just because you want to hit some number for the month. It's about maintaining a certain level and a discipline. And I think the residents really appreciate that, because once they see that culture has changed and that there really is a new day and that it really is a new community, then they buy into a lot of what you're trying to do. They buy into the fact that it's a community and no longer a trailer park. And I think that's, Derek, that's a key component. One of the things we stress, one of the things we want our on-site managers to be part of, that they realize that they're, that they have to make sure we change the culture inside that community. And that, I think, is, a key, recipe to turning those parks around. Everything else that'll happen over time. You invest, but that's a key component. It's changing that culture.
Yeah, for sure. And you do that, I'm guessing, rule enforcement. Hey, we're going to start cleaning up this place. The common areas don't look like shit anymore. You're picking up all the stuff. that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
And listen, it's easy to say that every park you buy that's all tenant-owned homes. A lot of times it's a mixed bag. You're going to get some park-owned homes. You're going to get, some of that, and we have to set the standard in the homes that we have, right? So we have to make sure that look and feel is the same, because I can't go to you, Derek, and say, I need you to improve your skirting. I need to cool seal your roof. I need you to put a coat of paint on your house, if the homes that we own are shabby and derelict, right? So if there's something that's, that needs to be repaired, we want to do that first. We want to set a standard and now say, Derek, look at what we've done. We need you to match the standard. How can we help so you can get there? Because we want to add value to you. We want you to be able to live there. We want you to be able to be proud of where you live. If you want to leave, we want to create some value that you could sell your home. And oh, by the way, these are the improvements we're going to make to the, community as a whole. And so now you're part of that. So that's a key, that's like a key component for us, where we'll go in and make sure that we have what we're responsible for right before we ask the residents to kind of change.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, Frank, like one of the things that I learned getting into this business, and it sort of baffled me, but I mean, it makes sense that like you'll have people, and if you're new in this business and you're going in and buying a value add property, you'll learn this eventually. There will be people in the park that don't like the improvements that you're making.
100%.
Like
100%.
they won't like you paving the roads. They're mad about it. Like, I'm serious, right, Frank?
Yeah. So I, in my experience, I mean, there was one person who I found that didn't like the roads being done, which just shocked me, because his response was, I know now you're going to raise the lot rent. Well, everybody else had a dirt road. Who had holes in front of it? When it would rain, it'd get muddy, it'd be all over. Everybody else was happy. But yes, I mean, we invested a very hefty sum to improve the roads. At some point, and plus your rents hadn't been raised in 10 years. And so that's the big issue. But by far and large, I mean, if you create value for your end user, right, our customer, we're looking to make sure that they see value in being there. I think that it mitigates some of that. But you're always going to have people who are just, why are you doing this? Why are you doing? We had one person, I'll never forget, Derek, and when she moved into the park, she was one of the first people that moved into a park we were turning around, and she didn't like it because it was, scary. She was in the back of the park by herself, she was scared. Okay, I get it. We made the community light, put some lights in there, not for her, but as part of the plan. But she was scared because it was empty. Then we got the park filled, and it was filled, family filled. Now there was too much noise.
Yeah.
So the kids, I'm like, but the kids playing, like, I can't tell the kids not to play outside. So, you're not going to be able to make everybody happy all the time, but you just want to put out something where, you're proud of what you've done, and that you could bring your family to, and that they would be proud of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's that person in every park. I remember this lady at a park here in Orlando, and it was so dark in this park. I mean, at night you couldn't see, your hand in front of your face. So we usually put like these nice solar lights up throughout the park, and we put them up. I mean, the place is, it's fantastic. But she didn't like it because there was a little too much light coming in her window at night. Now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had the other one I wanted to tell you about in the first park that we bought. So we paved the roads, and I get a call from, so the first part, I was managing the whole thing myself. I'm taking the calls and everything. I get a call, and they sent me like a video. So the guy who didn't like the roads being paved had his his old Bronco there burning out on the new roads, like just like, it's just hilarious.
It's funny because I always say that after buying the park, right, that's a great day. You close on it, you're there, you're so excited, all this work gets done, and the next best day is always like when the roads get done. Like that's always a scene. I always want to be down on site, watching them come in there, pave the roads. Everybody's watching, especially when you have a community that the roads are so, abysmal. You have craters in there, and then, it impacts everybody. And, to do that. I'm sure his neighbors, the best part of it is I'm sure his neighbors were more upset with him than you were, because they're like, what are you doing? They finally, somebody did this, and now you're doing, now you're ruining it. So that's where you could get them on your side. They almost feel bad for you. So that's might've been a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, true. Yeah, man, and paving the roads, like I totally agree with you. Like when the roads are done being paved, there's like nothing more satisfying because it changes the dynamic of the park so dramatically. Is it
So
expensive? Absolutely it is if you do it right. Um, it's expensive, but I got to tell you, it's huge. And what I actually learned that I like is that I have them stripe the road too, and you may do that too. If you stripe, you put the white lines on the outside. It
okay.
just gives it like I don't know, just kind of like more form. It looks even more
Really?
professional. It's only an extra few grand for them to come in and do it. Paint the speed bumps and put the
Yes.
white stripes on the ends of the road. It makes huge difference.
That's a that one I haven't done, and I might have to steal that one from you, Derek. So next time we do the roads, I'm gonna put a little
Dude,
white
you
stripe
should,
on this.
man. I'm telling you. After we had a contractor was like, "Hey, you want us to stripe them?" And I'm like, "No, not really." And he's like, "Well, it'll be an extra, couple $1,000 or whatever." And I'm like, "All right, we'll just do it." And he did it, and I'm like, "Oh man, every park from now on is getting striped because it looks that much better." Totally, totally. Um, but I wanted to ask you this, Frank, and kind of switching topics. You mentioned something kind of, cold money and money that's not necessarily local. Why do you think that there has been so much flock to this asset class in the last, 4, 5, 6, 7 years?
I think, obviously this is the last sector of the real estate market that's not dominated by PE large family offices. It's still fractured. It's still predominantly mom and pop owned, legacy owned. So that creates the opportunity, number one. Number two, I think we're chasing yield. I mean, when rates got super low, people were just deploying capital wherever, right? Just to see where they could make some additional income coming out of it. And then I think that the crux of it all, though, is that this country, Derek, has an affordability issue, and it
Yeah.
touches everybody, like straight across the board. I mean, unless you're the top 1% of 1%, affordability affects you, because if it doesn't affect you, it affects your children, right? Like, and people need a place to live, and your average traditional stick-built house nationwide is still over $500,000 a year. Where a manufactured home, and I don't know about you, but in our communities, we could sell them as low as 55,000 a year, right? 55,000, right? So there's a huge difference in price point. People can relate to that, and I think because of that, people realize, like, hey, this is an investment. Affordability is an issue, right? You can provide great housing at a discount, and that I think some of the cold money looked at it as, well, I have a captive market, because it's not easy. To your point before, it's not easy to move those homes.
Yeah.
Now, some of those operators that are coming to the space, and I'm not going to name names, but who bought a lot of parks and raised lot rents without creating value. Like, just raising rents doesn't create value. I mean, they just raised rents on these residents. They found that they've gone through 2 or 3 different operation staffs. They found that they've lost residents, and they've created bad press. And that's an issue that we have, because they just were very cold. I come in, I could raise rents, and that's it. Not realizing what made these residents stay so long wasn't necessarily the money, but it was the emotional attachment people felt with that community. If
Sure.
that local operator, right, was there, he might not have been the best, quote unquote, operator, might not have fixed the potholes, but he knew if your back went out and that's why you went out of work, and knew that maybe you don't pay on the first, but you pay on the end of the month, that you'll always catch up. He knew they might have known the problems that you had in your family. So they would give you that kind of emotional attachment that compelled people to want to stay longer.
Right.
And you don't find that in other asset classes necessarily. And I think you got to blend both of them if you want to be successful in this space.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. What do you think, like, future outlook on the space? Like, obviously there's been consolidation happening for sure. When do you think, I mean, a lot of the big stuff, 200, 300 unit deals and up, they've largely been consolidated.
Mhm.
But do you think there's a point where it's like, okay, everything's consolidated now and you can't buy anything? In my opinion, I see that, I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but what's your opinion on that?
So I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's a concern, right?
Mhm.
And it's a concern because you don't want it in so few hands, right? It's better when there's a opportunity in with other operators just to get a differentiation of value. I do see more capital that's flowing into this space. I think we're at the point right now where the pace where parks were closing down nationwide, I think people are realizing that you need to have more of these manufactured housing communities being built. I know Texas is probably leading the charge on that, but I do start to think you're going to see some expansion because this is the most affordable option.
Yep.
I don't know what 10 years is going to hold. And I'm paraphrasing, listening to from a podcast of what Jeff Bezos said. But I know in 10 years, people are going to want affordability, they're going to want speed, and they're going to want optionality. And if you look at our space in terms of the housing we can provide, it has all that. You can deliver a brand new home faster than you can build a stick-built home. It's more affordable than any traditional house. You cannot build traditional stick-built homes the same way. The quality is almost identical. And there's so many different options you can have. So I think that puts us in a good position as we move forward. But to your point, I do think that there is some consolidation or some more consolidation coming. And we were just at IMN. I mean, there's a lot of big capital out there looking, but it's the difference in the operation that's key, right? And I think that's the problem. They haven't, finding the right operators, finding the right people in the space who can kind of combine the best of the old and the new. And I think that's going to be where this space will be in 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. What do you think? So you guys you're buying value add stuff mainly?
Correct.
Right.
We're mainly, we're very opportunistic. I mean, I like to say that I might not have any hair, but most of my deals have hair on them. So, I mean, we're looking for places where we can go in there and create some value in those communities. I mean, that's just been our bread and butter so far and how we've kind of built out that platform. And now we're looking at, we've got some communities where we have some expansion plays at it. I think that's as we would talk about, infill, that's an avenue of the market that we're exploring where you have a park that has additional land or land that we've been able to accumulate around it, where we can expand off of what's existing and kind of meet market demand as necessary by expanding an existing community.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And how are you guys, because it was difficult, like, when we were turning around all these deals and had all these projects going on, it was difficult, for me, even being within, driving distance from just about everything. And so how are you guys, or how have you figured out how to manage these projects from a distance? Because, being there and making sure the asphalt guys putting 2 inches of asphalt down, like, it's like, unfortunately you have to do that. But how are you like managing these projects from afar?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we've done is we looked at like geographic hubs. So when we go into an area, if we built out a strong team, we know that we could, this is a business of nickels and dimes, Derek, and you know that you have to, watch every dollar going in and out. So when you can get scale in an area, what it allows you to do is it defers some costs and it allows us to put really qualified people in assets at a time that might need, some improvements where it wouldn't be such a heavy burden if we just had those people on one community. So we try to stay in geographic hubs, number one, right? So we have a synergy in that scale. Right? And then when you have good people, you have to figure out a way to keep them, right? So that's number two. And then what we've been able to do is we built out a back office admin staff remotely overseas. We have an office that was built out in Kosovo, actually, for us by somebody who worked in our office, who had to go back home and she wanted to continue to work for us. She's spent time living in a one of our communities, so we have a back end office that's allowed us to keep in touch with our residents and maintain that touch and feel at a very cost effective way of doing so. So we've been able to keep our costs, contained while still being able to handle those projects. And, fortunately, we've been able to build out and keep some really, really good people. And, we couldn't do that if we didn't have a good team on the ground. And that's a lot of credit goes to them, right? That they're able to implement that plan and they're dedicated to doing what they do.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's a team effort. Like these projects, it's a freaking team effort. There's no question about that. I'm curious. I wanted to ask about your back office. Like, what are the functions of that? What all do they do?
So, we have, customer service. Obviously, someone calls in, they have questions. When we onboard a new resident, we want to make sure that, we're transitioning a lot of people to home ownership for the first time. So you just don't want to say, here's your home, talk to you later. We want to make sure that they stay in touch with them for a period of time so they know what to look for, if they have any questions. So this way, little problems don't become big problems, whether it's a small leak or a small issue that they might have with a home doesn't become a bigger, more expensive problem or costly problem. So it could kind of smoothen that transition and we could just maintain that touch and feel. We have a marketing team. We have a sales team so that takes in if we have any homes that we have available. We're constantly out there, aggressively making sure we're talking about what's happening inside those communities and we're maintaining the relationships with our residents on the ground and somebody who takes maintenance calls. And then a compliance department, so if someone's not, leaving trash there, or they got their cars up on blocks, something's going, making sure that they're giving them notice that, hey, this is going here. Basically providing a back-end support so our managers can be more in touch with the residents, but not get bogged down with, oh, I got to get this paperwork done. Oh, I got to do this or this one. So they can, here's the issue. They can identify it. I can get the work done, like the physical labor of that work done, notifying the residents, contacting the resident, calling. And the manager could be more of the ambassador of the brand and making sure that things are happening on the ground that need to be happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that because that, you're going to provide a better service to the tenants by doing that. Ultimately, it's a better experience. So,
correct. It's all about the consumer experience, right? You want to make sure that at the end of the day, we could spend thousands of dollars on marketing. The best marketing you're ever going to have is that happy resident who's going to tell their cousin, tell their coworker, tell their friends and family, like, this is the place you want to live. And that's going to drive. So yes, we market, but we also want to market to our residents and make sure that they're, equally engaged and as excited about the community as we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that, Frank. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming on, man. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with, and you can let people know where they can find you?
Sure. Listen, man, I appreciate being on. We built out, when we started in the business, Derek, there was, and still very fractured, getting information, getting news, and we created a platform for people to share in that. So if they're looking for opportunity or news or education, entertainment, it's the MHPExchange.com. They can contact us from there. We have our podcast, which, we're still working with Derek to get him on as well. And we're looking forward to have him on. But the MHPExchange.com, or you could check out our video series at Trailer Park Turnaround on YouTube.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Frank, again, thank you for coming on and thank everyone for tuning in to another episode of the MHP Show. We will see you all next week. Peace.